Private Alexander Sheets, Company B, 131st Illinois Infantry, died April 12, 1863, of chronic diarrhea in the smallpox hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. The 25-year-old Hardin County farmer was single and had served only 5 months. He is the first death in the war's 3rd year. The war's 2nd year had been one of consolidating gains, of waiting, of disease, and of desertion. It was the year Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation challenged the beliefs of Egypt's soldiers and citizens. Anti-war forces, family, and friends hammered away at soldiers to just come home. It was a year of adjustment, of decision-making. It was a year that tried men's souls. While some of Egypt's soldiers still hoped to see the elephant, most wished for war's end and home. Ulysses Grant, frustrated by earlier failures, was determined to take Vicksburg, cutting the Confederacy in two and opening the Mississippi River to free navigation. Grant's campaign against Vicksburg started in late April 1863.
April 16th. We are under marching orders and expecting soon to go downriver. 32 boats loaded with troops passed down this afternoon. We also embarked on boats. April 17th. When daylight appeared, we found ourselves at Milliken's Bend, almost in sight of Vicksburg. More troops are coming here every day.
Sergeant Edmund Newsom, Company B, 81st Illinois. John A. Logan, a newly commissioned Major General, took a more important role in the upcoming campaign. Grant had prompted this after viewing a list of promotions which did not include Logan. Incensed, he wrote Lincoln, informing him of his displeasure and commenting that N.B. Bradford, who was on the list, would scarcely make a respectable hospital nurse if put in petticoats. The President added Logan to the list. Grant ordered Colonel Benjamin Grierson to take his cavalry through Mississippi to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, as a diversion. Traveling over 600 miles, they not only distracted the Confederates' attention, but cut supply lines to Vicksburg. Southern Illinoisans made up almost 1/3 of Grierson's force. Grant moved on Port Gibson, May 1st, 1863.
We were ordered to the front and came into the fight so gradually that I found nothing unusual. First hearing the artillery, next the rattle of muskets. Soon the hospitals where surgeons were sawing and carving. Next the wounded being carried off the field. Next the battleground where was laying dead men, dead horses, wrecks of gun carriages. Finally came under fire the enemy's artillery and sharpshooters.
Sergeant Arthur P. McCullough, Company D, 81st Illinois, on first seeing the elephant.
That's why they were there, was to fight. And not to sit around the camps and get sick and die, but to if you had to die doing these things, if you had joined to save the Union, it would be so much better in battle. I think you'd have a sense that you had not completed what you were doing. So they all wanted to see the elephant.
Less than 2 weeks, Grant's forces attacked Raymond, Mississippi.
May 12th. We met the enemy about noon, 2 miles from Raymond. General Logan's division engaged the enemy at once. The 81st were going at double quick when General Logan rode up where bullets flew the thickest and shouted, "Turn back, go to the right and flank them." We poured it into the enemy's ranks and repulsed them. The enemy fled in haste.
Sergeant Newsom. Grant's army took Jackson, Mississippi's capital, on May 14th, and 2 days later fought at Champion Hill. General John A. Logan's division proved crucial in this battle. As the battle raged, Logan shouted, "We must whip them here or all go under the sod together." Among his soldiers were 2 solidly Egyptian regiments, the 31st and the 81st Illinois Infantries.
We met the enemy on Champion Hill about 11 a.m. The rebels charged several times, but were repulsed. We advanced and kept up a continuous fire on them. Balls and shells fell thickly amongst us. We started them on retreat and pursued. The 81st in advance. Their retreat soon became a run for life, a panic. The rebels threw away their guns to hasten their flight. We captured 36 cannons and 15,000 men.
Sergeant Newsom. Grant attacked Vicksburg on May 19th. Private John B. Spiller, Company C, 31st Illinois, sick at Young's Point, Louisiana, heard but did not take a part in this battle. He wrote his wife, Clarissa Jane.
The battle is now raging in all its terrific fury, but I think the rebels are giving back. At this time I hear a continual roar of cannon and small arms. I'm in hope in a few days to be able to give you an account of a complete victory, and shortly after that, peace and union.
Vicksburg's determined defenders repulsed this assault. Grant lost 934 killed and wounded, the Confederates 70. Grant attacked the city again on May 22nd after a heavy artillery bombardment of the Confederate works. At 10 a.m., McPherson ordered his 17th Corps forward, but they quickly recoiled under the Confederate fire. Letters home tell of the horrors of this day.
I call it a slaughter. We stormed the fortifications 30 feet high where we attacked. We were told not to fire until we were inside. The 81st lost 107 men in 10 minutes. How any of us escaped is wonderful. Oh, it was a frightful massacre.
Captain John P. Reese, Company E, 81st Illinois Infantry.
Captain Brookings was cut off like a flower in the first bloom, killed on that same day after our regiment suffered so on that fatal 22nd of May, the sad day that sent mourning in so many houses in Illinois.
Private Edwin Loosely, Company A, 31st Illinois. As a result of this battle, Grant ordered the Siege of Vicksburg, and the days settled into a familiar pattern for Egypt's warriors.
I've gotten used to the shells and bullets, continuously passing over. Don't worry, plenty of places to hit without striking me.
Take everything into consideration, we live very good. Just 2 months earlier, Logan supported the use of African American volunteers in the Union Army, admitting that he had been educated to support slavery, but the war had opened his eyes. His decision to do so was soon vindicated. Milliken's Bend, just 15 miles above Vicksburg, housed supply depots and hospitals. It was garrisoned by 1,250 former slaves who had mustered into the United States Colored Infantry only 16 days earlier, and 160 soldiers from the 23rd Iowa. On June 7th, the Confederates attacked in an effort to destroy Grant's supplies. Despite little training and inferior weapons, the black soldiers fought bravely and finally defeated the Confederates. It was not just the Secretary of War who complimented these men, but also white soldiers.
There was a hard battle fought on the 7th between the rebels and 900 Negro soldiers. The Negroes knew that wounded and prisoners were butchered in cold blood by the Confederates. They rallied and routed the rebels in a terrible fight where they neither asked nor gave quarter. I say good for them.
Captain Reese.
It was difficult, I think, on the part of a lot of the men from Southern Illinois to accept black troops. And Logan spoke to them, and as one person wrote, after Logan talked about the acceptance of black troops, that was that. And I think Milliken's Bend, at least in the eyes of not just the leadership in Washington, but also in the eyes of a lot of the men, proved that African American soldiers could fight.
On June 13, 1863, Harper's Weekly took notice of Logan. In addition to an illustration of the Battle of Champion Hill, it pictured a clean-shaven Logan on its front cover. From this point forward, the name Logan would readily identify the accomplished general from Egypt. The battle, which took place at the crater during the Siege of Petersburg, is well known, but the crater at Vicksburg is not. On June 25, 1863, 2,200 pounds of explosives were ignited under the Vicksburg line. Soon the 45th Illinois was sent into the 12 feet deep and 40 feet wide crater caused by the explosion. There they suffered withering fire. The 56th was sent to relieve them and was soon in the thick of things. The disastrous battle is described in this partial letter from an unknown member of the 56th Illinois to John M. Boycourt of Golconda, Illinois.
The 45th Illinois double-quicked into the embrasure, and as they got in, began firing, and the Rebs commenced throwing over hand grenades, many of which caused a great deal of slaughter. In less than 15 minutes, 17 men were killed and wounded out of 3 companies, numbering in all 70 men. But the braves stood at their posts until relieved. Some of them, becoming desperate on account of their guns failing to fire, climbed to the top of the fort and shouted for the others to come in and charge the Rebs out. But that would have been instant death to all of them. Tom Oliver of Company C, you remember him. He got on the top of the parapet of the fort and shot over 200 rounds at them. 5 men were busy loading and handing guns to him. He remained up until shot dead. First Lieutenant Albright of Captain Atwell's company was killed. A hand grenade knocked him down, and as he arose, another burst upon the back of his head and blowed his brains out. The orderly Curry of the same company was struck in the breast by one, and when it exploded, it blew him all to pieces.
In January 1867, Albright and Curry's bodies were moved from the battlefield to the Vicksburg National Cemetery. Reinterment records noted that the men were buried side by side and that a gold pin and pin holder were found with Albright. Logan abandoned this attempt as too costly.
The enemy raised the flag of truce this morning. Silence settled on the contending armies.
Vicksburg surrendered on Independence Day, just 1 day after the Union victory at Gettysburg.
What a glorious 4th of July this is for us.
I think I can safely holler now, bully hallelujah for Vicksburg, the great, the Gibraltar of the West, the backbone of the Southern Confederacy, is at last fallen.
Vicksburg's surrender made it possible to grant leaves for many of Grant's soldiers. Logan went home in mid-July. On July 31st, he delivered his great Union speech to deafening cheers and applause from 5,000 listeners in DuQuoin, Illinois.
The institution of slavery is utterly worthless, whether the rebels gain their independence or not. All those hellhounds and traitors, so help me God, I am for hanging them as soon as caught. I am for peace, and I tell them now they can get peace at any moment. Let them lay down their arms, come and beg pardon of the government, and then they can have peace. Until then, I am for offensive warfare. They say that John Logan and his chaps down here are abolitionists. I tell you why we are abolitionists. It is because we are in the army, and Abe Lincoln is president. And that's all I have to say. If they call me an abolitionist, I can't help it. If fighting rebels and traitors be an abolitionist, I suppose I must be counted in. And if that makes the soldiers abolitionists, there are a good many of us. We don't care. God knows we are true to our country, and that is what is wanted.
The immensely successful speech strengthened Illinois' pro-Union support and enhanced Logan's statewide and national reputation as a great leader and patriot. Even Lincoln realized that this was a much different Logan than the one who 2 years earlier had promised to bring his boys home if the president freed the slaves. So much different, in fact, that on August 22nd, John Hay, Lincoln's personal secretary, wrote in his diary, "The president today said that John Logan was acting so splendidly now that he absolved him in his own mind for all the wrong he ever did and all he will do hereafter." With Grant's promotion to General of the Armies, Major General William Tecumseh Sherman became commander of the Army of the Tennessee, and Logan took his position as commander of the 15th Corps. By the end of the year, Logan commanded men from Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Missouri, and Ohio, serving in 31 infantry regiments. As the year progressed, not just disease but combat took more and more lives. Parents and wives began to fear the mail would bring unwanted news. Wednesday, September 16, 1863, Nancy Mann wrote to her husband, John P. Mann, 2nd Lieutenant, Company K, 5th Illinois U.S. Cavalry.
I am very sorry to hear you are so unwell, but you may be sure that I was glad to see your handwriting, for I had feared that the next letter that I would receive would not be written by you, but would bring me sorrowful tidings of you. I hope that you may get to come home soon.
The Battle of Chickamauga on September 19th and 20th, 1863, was the first major battle fought in Georgia. This Confederate victory forced Union forces back to Chattanooga, where they were besieged. 22 Egyptians lost their lives as a result of this battle. A quarter of those who died were from the small town of DeSoto in Jackson County. These deaths rippled out into the community. Sisters Sarah and Jane Knight became widows. The Friedline family lost a son and a nephew. The Farner family lost a son, and 4 children became orphans. 5 days later, the 40th Infantry left Memphis and marched to Chattanooga, arriving there on November 22nd. On November 25th, these boys from Edwards, Franklin, Hamilton, Wabash, and White counties, under fire, led the assaulting column upon the enemy's works on Mission Ridge. Egypt lost 16 men, either killed or mortally wounded. Grant's victory in this battle forced the Confederates to retreat toward Dalton, Georgia. 1864 saw a new problem on the horizon for the Union. It had been difficult to recruit soldiers to replace men killed by combat or disease. And soon whole regiments would need to be recruited if volunteers did not extend their 3-year enlistments. Asking a man to re-enlist seemed unfair to many on the home front.
Jimmy writes that many of your regiment have re-enlisted. I do not think it is fair for men who have re-enlisted, when there is so many men who are useless at home that should take their places. More than 3 years in the Army will break the Constitution of any man.
Nancy Mann, January 11, 1864. And Egypt's southern sympathizers vowed openly to kill any man who dared to recruit for the Union. When Mary Jane Cummings' brother, Private Thomas Richards, Company K, 18th Illinois, returned to Jackson County to recruit in 1864, she wrote her sister, Emmeline.
It makes me shudder to think he has been in the service nearly 3 years and has never been hurt, and now is at home and his life in danger. Tell him never to get the door of anybody at night, as they might come with false orders.
As the war's 3rd year continued, letters from home became even more important to the soldiers. These letters lifted soldiers' spirits with news of home and the warm humor and affection of their wives and families.
You say that for 50 cents, you will give me your photograph, as these are war times and money scarce. I will not agree to your terms, but I will give you 50 kisses, payable on sight. If you agree to my proposition, send me your picture. If not, let me know the very least you will take for it, and perhaps we can make a trade.
The war's 3rd year saw no great battles after Mission Ridge. Union General Burnside's corps prevented Confederate General Longstreet from taking Knoxville. Grant sent forces after Longstreet, driving the Confederates farther into eastern Tennessee. The winter was a bitter one, and the troops sent by Grant after Longstreet suffered from exposure in the hard, cold march. Egypt's men participated in all of these actions. In February 1864, General Sherman began the Meridian, Mississippi campaign, and in March, General Banks began the Red River campaign. Egypt lost its last soldiers to combat at the Battle of Pleasant Hill, Louisiana, on April 9, 1864. The next day, disease took the lives of Southern Illinois' last 3 soldiers to die in the war's 3rd year. Lieutenant Edmund Newsom took time to sum up his feelings about the war's third year on Washington's birthday and found reason for hope.
This is Washington's birthday. It's just a year since we left Memphis. Just then, the prospect looked dark. The rebellion seemed as far as ever from being put down. The rebel army was flush with fresh victories. The Union army, sick, dispirited, demoralized, dying and deserting. The Northern people dissatisfied. The Copperheads rejoicing and encouraging and protecting deserters. Since that time, Vicksburg, Gettysburg, Chattanooga, Missionary Ridge, Port Hudson, and several others have passed into history. The reenlistments of veterans and the President's amnesty are working wonders. There is now good ground to hope that the coming year will finish the war and restore the Union.
It seems, at least according to Newsom, that the year ended on a good note. In mid-April 1864, Margaret Compton of Golconda received a letter, not from her husband Jerry, but from his captain.
Mrs. Compton, I am under the fearful necessity of informing you of the death of your husband. He departed this life the 13th day March, A.D. 1864. He was attacked with the smallpox and died a few days after he was taken. May his light illumine the pathway of others, and may the loss which you and his imperiled nation sustains in her hour of need be his eternal gain. Thousands have fallen, and thousands more will fall before the knell of present war is sounded.
Egypt lost 814 men in the war's third year. Battles great and small took the lives of 148 men. Disease took 451 lives, and 196 soldiers died of unlisted causes. 11 men died as a result of accidents, 2 were murdered, 1 died while a POW. On April 12, 1864, Egypt's warriors were poised to advance onto Atlanta and the sea.